All right, our next guest tonight, we're going to bring in for our special coverage of the New Hampshire primaries. We're joined by former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer. Sean, great to see you.
Hey, good evening, John.
All right, so a lot of excitement in New Hampshire, and it looks like, Sean, we're going to have our first taste of what it's like to winnow down the field. Do you see Joe Biden having any legitimate shot after tonight?
That's a great question. I mean, just before I go any further, we've already seen, I think, what will be our first casualty of the night. Sources are now talking about the fact that Andrew Yang intends to suspend his campaign tonight. So before the votes are even tallied, we've seen one go down. To your question about Biden, look, I think because of his, staying power, that he's got enough name recognition, he's been the front runner for so long, I think he can limp out of here to South Carolina. And with these revelations today about Michael Bloomberg's stop and frisk comments that have come out, that might give him a new life, to go to South Carolina. Or Nevada, where
has suspended his campaign so far. Where will the Yang voters go? We don't know. But he was very popular, Sean, on the campaign trail, and he could be a pretty powerful surrogate for one of the candidates. The question is, where will he go? The other thing, too, we were talking about meeting and beating expectations. Amy Klobuchar's name has come up recently here. You heard this term, Klobentum. Everyone loves to throw a little momentum around here. But do you think she has a legitimate shot of using this bounce to propel her into one of the front-runner positions?
It's a great question. I mean, the one thing that's really unique that people have to understand is that in most of these states, they've got a 15% threshold before you can actually get a delegate. So, yes, she is climbing. She was at 3% in August. She got as high as 10%, and now keeps getting into the teens. That's good for her. You obviously want to continue to move up, but you really need to get over 15%. So it's good for her. I think any candidate that has momentum, again, a lot of this is sort of like earnings reports when you talk to people on Wall Street. It's about expectations. Right. You can get 40%, but if you're expected to get 50, and in the case of Klobuchar, because she continues to climb up, that's a positive thing. Campaigns need money. People like to be with winners, people who are going forward, not backwards. And that's what's killing Biden. While he may still be in the 20s nationally, people know that because he came in poorly in Iowa and will probably come in poorly tonight, it makes it hard to go out to donors and say, hey, keep giving to me. So I think the real unique thing tonight is going to be who ends up where, and those percentages are going to matter. Mm-hmm. Iowa and New Hampshire aren't delegate rich. There's 1,300 delegates at stake on Super Tuesday, while there's been 30 and 40 respectively in these first two states. But it is about momentum. It's about making sure that donors keep funding your campaign. Biden, my goodness, for 8 years as vice president, 30 years in the Senate, and national frontrunner, to place so poorly in these first two states, it really is not good for him. The biggest X factor that I've seen in modern politics is Mike Bloomberg. He chose not to play in the first four.
Yeah, it's amazing to see, because we haven't seen anything like this, where a guy can self-fund his campaign, be ubiquitous on TV and on digital with advertising everywhere. And we've heard so much about him, Sean. We've heard his numbers rise in the polls. We just talked about that. But when it actually comes time to vote, how do you see Mike Bloomberg being positioned when the votes actually start coming in these primaries where he is competing?
Yeah. So the interesting thing is, it's not just the money, it's how he's playing the game, right? He has ignored the first four states, gone heavy into the Super Tuesday states. But Bloomberg actually already opened up offices in the Virgin Islands. I mean, he's playing delegate math in a way that no one else is. And the thing that's so interesting is that you've got two lanes, basically, what it comes down to. I would call sort of the less crazy lane, which is your Biden, Klobuchar, Bloomberg lane, and then you've got the real crazy socialist lane, which is the Sanders, Warren kind of lane. And I think what we're going to do is we're going to end up with one of each. So right now, I think, Warren's having a tough time making the case to go forward. This is her backyard. She represents Massachusetts to the south of New Hampshire. Sanders represents Vermont to the north. And if she places fourth below two people that aren't even close to New Hampshire, it's a tough case to make. So ultimately, I think Bernie starts taking over the progressive lane. And then the big question, and this is where Bloomberg is playing in the long game, he believes clearly, when you saw him with the ads, touting Obama's support, he's trying to take all the wind away from Biden. He wants to drive that other lane. And that's what's going to make a really interesting fight. You've got the passion and the grassroots with Bernie Sanders, and then you've got the establishment elite that'll probably end up with Bloomberg, and this is going to be a real fight like we've never seen.
All right, let me ask you this question, Sean. What is worse, a fourth-place finish for Warren, considering it's right in her backyard, or a fifth-place finish for Joe Biden?
Fifth place for Biden, hands down. I mean, you can't be the national frontrunner and go 4 in Iowa and then 5 here. It just doesn't. It's just hard to explain to somebody how you're still the front runner. But I don't think that fourth for Warren is strong either. And again, remember, it's something that we talked about a moment ago. These percentages are going to matter.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I mean, if it's a car crash at the front where everyone's at 22%, 22.1, 22.3, et cetera. I mean, that's the thing with Buttigieg and Sanders in Iowa. It was literally a virtual tie. That's one thing. But right now, at least in terms of what we saw polling-wise going into this morning, that's not where they were. You had Sanders way out in front, and then you had Biden and Warren fighting it out for 4-5.
And who do you think, Sean, is in the best position right now going into South Carolina and Nevada and Super Tuesday?
I think Sanders is right now. I mean, look, he's got the momentum. He's got the rallies. He's got the people. I think, as I said, Bloomberg's the X factor because that we've never seen this kind of money and this kind of strategy combined play out on either party. And then you've got the Buttigieg X factor, which is, was he sort of the flavor of the month going into Iowa, which I think he kind of was. Because Buttigieg went all in Iowa, and then you can kind of, soar a little and sail a little into New Hampshire on momentum. But it's really hard to pivot into South Carolina and Nevada. And the thing about Buttigieg is he's not even, he's polling somewhere between 0 and 1% of the black vote, which is crucial in South Carolina and definitely important in Nevada. And so I think Buttigieg might have been, the flavor of the month in Iowa and still kind of the flavor of the week in New Hampshire a little. But he doesn't show any signs of being able to translate that into the next two contests.
Yeah, he's going to hit a wall in South Carolina. And the question is, and you brought this up, is what is it going to be like when we kind of have these two candidates emerge, whoever's going to emerge from the establishment lane, whoever's going to emerge from, looks like Bernie Sanders. But, you could have a New York billionaire going up against Bernie Sanders in the primary campaign, which would be a very stark contrast for the Democrats, and want to see what would happen once the nominee is eventually chosen. Sean, as President Trump is watching these results come in from New Hampshire, you know better than most how attuned he is to some of the signs that other people might not be picking up on. But as he sees these results start to come in tonight, what do you think is in his mindset about who he thinks he pairs up best against out of these Democratic candidates?
I think he said it earlier today. He's really not worried about any of them. I kind of think that whether it's right or not, I don't think what he believes, though, is that this is not a tough fight. But you got to look at Bernie Sanders. Right now, the early projections that we're seeing, the results so far have Sanders ahead. I think Trump looks at that and says, that's a fight I want to have because the contrast is pretty stark. Most Americans, I think recognize how strong the economy is, the things that the Trump administration have done, and don't think that socialism is the direction that we want to be going in. And Bernie Sanders, like none of the other candidates up there, really exemplifies a socialist agenda in a way that anyone else really advocates for. We know a lot of them support some of those policies, but Sanders is unabashed about that. And so I think Trump probably relishes this. He's looking at that saying, bring it on.
I think you're right. And, another thing, too, that I've been picking up on is, some of these established Democrats, members of Congress, who are they going to endorse? And, there's not a lot of support for endorsing a guy like Bernie Sanders because you think about a Democrat trying to run on that message or trying to align themselves with Bernie Sanders' platform when they may be running in a state like Ohio or Pennsylvania or Wisconsin or even in Texas. Even in the liberal parts of those states, they don't necessarily want to run on a platform of socialism.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. I mean, you look at the number of people, the members of Congress, as you point out, who are supporting him, who've endorsed him, despite his popularity, it's pretty low. And I think that speaks volumes to the fact that the establishment understands that tethering yourself to Bernie Sanders might not be what the grassroots is, but you can't win your own race as a mayor, as a governor, as a congressman, if you're having to defend, socialism. And I think Sanders is clear about where he wants to take this country. And I think that's something that most members of Congress, most senators, most mayors, governors are not comfortable having to defend.
No, it's true. And
the thing that's really interesting, John, the thing that's really interesting, John, is this. When you look at sort of the narrative with Trump, you've got all of these governors and congressmen who say, I love the policies, I love the results the president is getting, I'm totally in on the agenda. And you hear some talk about, well, I don't like the
Right.
tweets, or I don't like some of the comments that he makes. But they love the substance, they love the policy, and they love the results. On the Democratic side, it's actually interesting. They don't really have a problem with Sanders' rhetoric per se. They got a big problem with the policies. And they know that right now their big issue is they got to be able to go to their voters and say, can I defend Medicare for all, education for all, HBO for all? I mean, that's what Sanders is offering.
Don't forget Showtime for all, too.
No offense to Showtime.
And unfortunately, we're not going to get...
Hey, look, we got a long way to go.
That's right. We don't want to, and unfortunately, we're not going to get our $1,000 each a month because Andrew Yang, as you told us, has suspended his campaign. So that's not going to happen. But again, there are a lot of kind of...
Well, hold on. I wouldn't hold your breath. I mean, Sanders may grab that and say you could have Medicare for all and $1,000.
And your universal basic income as it stands. What do you think, too, Sean, about the comparisons that are made, although maybe a mirror image when it comes to policy, of Bernie Sanders being an insurgent campaign in the Democratic Party and Donald Trump being an insurgent campaign in the Republican Party, an outsider who really shook things up? A lot of people make that comparison.
I think it's a great comparison because the thing that I think is so fascinating is that 4 years later, we saw this dynamic start to play out in 2016, where you had massive swaths of both parties say, we're tired of the establishment, we're done with the talking points and the poll-tested stuff.
Hold on.
People who are authentic and real. And might not want to necessarily that we agree with everything, but we want someone who we feel actually speaks to us and is fighting for us. And Sanders and Trump are those people on polar ends of the ideological spectrum. But that still exists, and you see it with these young people. When you ask a young person on a college campus who they're with, it's not Pete Buttigieg, it's not Andrew Yang, it's not the younger members of the candidates that are running. It's Sanders, right? The oldest guy out there. That's who these young folks are with. That's where the energy is. The energy is with the oldest guy in the race.
All right, just going over the results again one more time. Bernie Sanders at 29%, Pete Buttigieg at 22%, Amy Klobuchar in third place, Elizabeth Warren, and then Joe Biden after that. We'll continue to update the results here throughout the night, but not much change since we first reported them a few moments ago. Sean, do you expect any big surprises tonight?
No, I think what you just said, where the horse race is probably where we're going to end up. I mean, people may go up or down a point, but I think pretty much but I think generally speaking, we're going to see a Sanders, Buttigieg, Klobuchar, Warren, Biden finish.
You just watched Newsmax TV, America's fastest growing news channel, now in 65 million homes. Get Newsmax TV on all the major cable systems or go to newsmaxtv.com and click on the Find Newsmax tab to locate us. Remember, Newsmax TV, we're real news for real people.